No
How's it
way.
going? Thanks for having me.
No, it's
It,
great to have you here, Samuel. Do you know, Matt, Samuel and I met in person for the first time, and I kept on thinking, I recognize this guy. I recognize this guy. And this was in October at the Neo Fest that I spoke about. And he said, You interviewed me at Neo at Stronger Conference. And I was like, That's how I know you. So
Yeah,
it's great to see you digitally again.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
it's great
Well,
to, yeah, it's great to see you, Samuel. Thanks for being here today. Bailey, you're going to kick us off with we're both going to the three of us are going to spend some time together. We've got fireside conversation, finding out about your your background that we've entitled this Fireside Lessons Learned from Pioneering a New Thing. So that's the kind of theme for this conversation. Really looking forward to finding out more, Samuel.
No,
yes.
definitely. I'm excited to speak to you guys.
Yeah, so Samuel, first of all, what inspired you to start off, and am I pronouncing it correctly, Alana?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
So it started back in 2020. It came out of a need. So I was on Twitter one day and I came across a tweet about basically an influencer wanting to spend her money with black brands. And I responded to that tweet and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But what would be great is to actually have a marketplace where people can shop with different black brands. And I actually was thinking rhetorically within the tweet and I said, that's a good idea. I might build it. And then someone responded and said, build it. And I thought about it for a day, prayed on it. And I was like, you know what, what's stopping me? So I actually reached out to my co-founder and then we started a journey to actually building it. The inspiration is my mother though. So she was an aspiring fashion designer. And she wasn't able to make it in the fashion industry. So we set up Alana in honor of her memory to ensure that those who aspire to make it in the fashion industry can.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
Already, Samuel, I mean, this is such a fascinating conversation. I'd love to, you just mentioned in that little sequence you put out on the tweet, you replied, and then you said you thought about it and prayed about it for a day, and then you reached out to your now co-founder. But how did you know who to reach out to? Had you already been thinking about a business, like, maybe there's a potential someone I could work with already, or was it just a friend that you thought, hey, what about this idea?
Yeah, so she was already a friend. We were both at the same church, and she just was a great person. I didn't really know her background at the time, but I really felt the impression of God from God to actually reach out to her. And when I did, it was ironic because she said she had already been praying about our friendship, and she had felt God say to her that we would eventually work together. Didn't know her background, didn't know where she was coming from, but it was upon speaking to her after that initial impression that I realized that she had a background in fashion over 17 years and she had worked in fashion on multiple levels. So that was the confirmation that I needed to ensure that I was working with the right person.
So in those first few moments, those early days, there is the kind of definition of entrepreneurship and pioneering. There's no blueprint, there's no roadmap.
Absolutely.
What did you learn in that time that might be useful for others that are in a similar situation?
Um, it wasn't my first business. So I had started up a social enterprise and I was running that for 10 years. So I had experience in business already. But fashion was a new industry for me. So obviously I had to build up connections from scratch. I had to figure out how we were going to launch this platform. And my timeline was around 6 months. So we spent about 4 months building the platform. Um, but yeah, one of the things that I've learned throughout the entrepreneurial journey that I feel is relevant is that it's important to have 4 C's, which is competency. So it's important that you're competent, you know your field inside out. Um, Business leaders like Warren Buffett, for instance, spend 80% of their time reading. They're competent in their field, they understand their field in a way that very few people do. So it's important that we're competent. It's important that you're consistent as well. Brand recognition is built off consistency. The people that we shop with, the brands that we're familiar with, the reason why we're familiar with them is because they're consistent. Community. It's important that we build community. Um, the most successful businesses are built a community around what they do. If you think of Apple, think of Nike, or think of any leading brand, they have a community of people that champion what they do. And fourth and finally, character. It's important that we're people of integrity, people that people can trust, and that we have a certain work ethic and integrity in the way that we approach business. So yeah, those are the 4 C's, and I recommend that people have those characteristics in order to build a business.
That's great, Samuel. So as a serial entrepreneur, whether a social entrepreneur or fashion entrepreneur or tech entrepreneur, you must have faced so many challenges. Are you able to share maybe a couple of those challenges and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I think starting out early on, one of the challenges that we faced was the amount of brands we were able to onboard. So initially we started off with a target of about 14 brands to launch Alana with. And we only managed to secure 4 within that time space. It was so difficult that we actually had to employ someone in Ghana on ground that's already in the fashion industry to recruit people within his network. So yeah, definitely there's been various hurdles, since we started. One of the things about pioneering and just building a business is that you will always face challenges that are unexpected. But it's how you bounce back from those challenges that will determine whether you're successful or not. Another issue is being finances. There's been things that we've wanted to do, but we haven't had the finances to be able to scale or do certain things at the time that we anticipated in doing it. I remember we wanted to launch a piece, and this was an in-house piece that was developed by my co-founder at the time. And yeah, when we started looking at costings and things that would require us to be able to launch this piece, it came up to like £700, just to produce the sample. So obviously we didn't want to outprice ourselves out of the market. So we knew that if we launched with that piece, it wouldn't really make sense financially. So yeah, there's been various hurdles. Those are the 2 that come to mind off the top of my head, but there's been various hurdles.
That's great. Thank you.
Samuel, just thinking, we've talked about discipleship. It takes place in the context that we find ourselves in. It's not the sort of only happens on a Sunday in a service. This is happening throughout the day, 24/7. And so wherever we find ourselves spending most of our week, LICC calls it our front lines. The marketplace, the business place. This is your front line, and where you're meeting God, where you're working this stuff out with God. Just love to hear how does your faith undergird your work, and how is practically God involved in your day-to-day leadership?
Great question. For me, very much prayer is integral. Yeah, I love to pray through things, consult with God in terms of ideas and things that I'm strategizing or working on. One of the things I also do is consult wise counsel. I speak to advisors, I speak to people that are in my network and circles and get their opinion and perspective on things. Those are the 2 ways mainly that God is involved in my day-to-day. But what underpins it is faith. I know the word inside and out. I spend time in the word. So I ensure that whatever I'm doing there's a foundation to it, and that's God.
That's so critical in this journey. Samuel, I want to look at opportunities for growth with you. DESC, DESC. Okay.
Yeah.
New desk redefines spaces used both online and offline. Could you elaborate on the concept behind this and what gap you saw in the market? It'd be really helpful.
So whilst I was developing this social enterprise, so I set up a social enterprise with other young people called HustleBucks, and we were training young people in garment printing skills, and we had a clothing brand as well, which we sold out of a shop in Brixton Village. So during the process of this was under the umbrella of a charity which I was a trustee for called 198 Contemporary Arts and Learning. In 2016, we decided to redevelop our space. So we managed to raise about 1.3 to do that. But in the midst of me going through this process, I was like, all right, in as much as this is a great space, target that young people where we're able to really kind of help them and meet them where they're at, how do people access this? And I thought to myself, actually, it would be great if there was some sort of marketplace or platform that enabled entrepreneurs to be able to access the space that's local to them, similar to Airbnb, but for spaces. And that's how the idea was essentially conceptualized. So spent about a year working on it, launched at Airbnb 2019 with a collaborative event there. And then 2020 COVID hit. And essentially that market died overnight. So it was a bit of a challenge. How do we now pivot, and how do we ensure that we're still meeting the need despite the circumstances? That's essentially that was the gap that I saw in the market, and that's how we tackled it.
It's you just mentioned a key word there, pivot, and there's people have entrepreneurs have an option to either pivot or persevere in it's kind of change trajectory based on the market conditions, or keep going. Any principles that you've picked up, when to pivot, when to persevere?
Absolutely. I think the entrepreneurial game is a game of perseverance anyway. Do you know what I mean? I think no matter what stage you're at, you're always going to have to persevere, and you're always going to have a vision that's bigger than yourself. I'm reminded of the scripture that says, imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. The entrepreneurial journey is perseverance. So I would say, in terms of knowing when to persevere and when to pivot, you have to look at the market dynamics. For me, for instance, with DESC, I knew that the climate just wouldn't allow us to actually stay truthful to the vision and the purpose at the time. So we paused it. Do you know what I mean? And my focus now changed to Alana, and we were able to set up Alana and, actually launch Alana within that time space. But yeah, I would say it's looking at the market, knowing what you're passionate about, and having a vision that's bigger than yourself. If the vision is just not possible at the time, then it might be worth working on something else.
Now let's talk about HustleBucks, your original idea, your social enterprise. What have you learned about fostering entrepreneurship amongst young people?
Great question. I would say, I think fostering entrepreneurship amongst young people, I think just working with young people is very interesting. I think in order to work with young people, you have to be passionate about young people. It comes with its challenges. It comes with different things you never anticipated. But I think one of the things that really kind of I loved about HustleBucks was seeing ideas come to life. You would meet young people, you would speak to young people, and they would have, like, for instance, an initial idea of, they want a t-shirt, on a subject matter to do with relationships or youth violence, or something that was personal to them. And then you will see them work through that process of sketching out their ideas, and then going through the design process to actually create something, that was tangible. So that was amazing, just actually witnessing young people come in, with no ideas or no kind of initial passion of what they wanted to do, and then see them develop something off the back of that. Also speaking at different places, when we launched our social enterprise was quite new at the time. So as a result of that, that led to me speaking at various places, and people had a lot of interest in what we were doing and how we were doing it. So meeting different types of people that I would have never envisioned meeting. I would have never envisioned going to Lithuania, for instance, to speak at their parliament. So all those kinds of opportunities really stood out to me and really broadened my perspective at the time. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if it does.
That's great.
And then just Samuel, just touching on Ilana, working with fashion designers, how is the way the original vision expressed, how's that changed over the years? It kind of relates back to that earlier question about pivoting and persevering. Has the vision kind of remained the same, but maybe the way that you've approached it changed, or has it remained the same since you launched it?
Yeah, our vision has very much remained the same. We want to be a pathway for emerging talent, and Alana means pathway. So we work with designers in two ways. So brands are featured on our platform, so consumers can shop with the different brands that we work with. But we also work with fashion designers to help them scale and develop what they're doing, their businesses, as well as their designs. So if you're a fashion designer, you can join our community and receive free consulting online. and then access to additional resources to help you on your fashion journey. So the vision's more or less stayed the same, since we've launched. And yeah, I believe that what we've launched is quite unique, and there isn't a reason for us to change that vision. But I feel that my approach in terms of how to reach designers has somewhat changed. So one of the things we're working on at the moment is looking to do a new kind of event where we bring our community experience to real life. So we'll work with designers to help them create garments over the course of a day, and then we'll commission the best pieces. So that will give a new way of allowing designers to really connect with us and gain the support they need to really scale what they're doing.
Samuel, now let's look ahead. What emerging technologies do you believe will have significant impact on the fashion industry as well as community spaces?
I think AI is something to definitely look out for. I think the VR spaces is another space to really kind of look out for. I think it'll be interesting to see how AI and VR merge eventually, because I feel that it's a matter of time before the two come together. Yeah, so I think those two spaces particularly, I know there's been quite a few interesting developments over the years with fashion in terms of the VR space. So, like for instance, during COVID, there was a lot of like, what do you call it, avatar kind of fashion shows that were created. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops and scales in the near future, what the role that VR plays in fashion. I feel that, eventually we're going to see like mirrors where people will be able to, test out what a particular piece will look like on them. That's eventually going to be something, that we see how real life products interact with the VR space will be very interesting.
Yeah. And is there anything you're dabbling with, you're trying out or testing?
Yeah, I want to get into the VR space very much soon. Yeah, that's something that I'm excited about, to be honest. The possibilities are endless, but it requires a lot of capital. Do you know what I mean? And at the moment, yeah, we're not at the stage where we can start to explore that, but that's definitely something on our radar in the near future.
Yeah. Samuel and I, our mutual friend Oyen has got a salon, and it's the first AR salon in Europe, I believe, Samuel.
Yeah.
And in her salon, you can see what your hair is going to look like if you get in a certain style. So if you want braids, then you'll see what your hair will look like before anyone touches your scalp or anything like that. So yeah, I know you've got somebody that can help you if you want to get into that space.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's exciting times. I think the possibilities are endless. We live in such a crucial time, and it's really going to be exciting to see how God uses his people, to really impact the different spheres of influence and, yeah, really kind of take tech to the next level.
Samuel, you mentioned the possibilities are endless, and then also resources are not endless.
Absolutely.
So how do you work that out? How do you work out what the priorities are? How do you find the resources for to take things to the next stage?
Great question. I think network plays a crucial part in that, telling people what you do and what you're about is important. You never know who can support your journey, even in the littlest of ways. Someone may not necessarily be able to help you, but they know someone who can. So I think your network is absolutely vital, and it comes back to community, right? So just letting people in your community know what you're doing, what you're about, and really kind of relying on that to help you in the initial stages is crucial. We live in a time where crowdfunding is something. If you got an idea, you can get strangers to fund your idea. So there is always ways to get the initial resources you need to really just develop what you're doing. So, but looking in your network and seeing what opportunities are available there is a best place to start.
Any top tips for networking? Because it can be quite daunting for some people who don't necessarily feel like they're an extrovert, for example, just kind of reaching out. What have you found that has worked for you in terms of networking?
I think for me, I'm a lover of people anyway. Do you know what I mean? I think that definitely helps. You got to genuinely love people to really want to connect with them and get to know them on a personal level. And I think if you're an introvert or you're someone who's not used to networking, It's hard. I think that one's definitely a challenge, but I think coming out of your comfort zone is important, and making sure that, you know, yeah, you buddy up with someone who is an extrovert, for instance, you know, that's definitely helpful. Like I remember a friend of mine I recommended he goes to NeoFest, and he's quite introverted. But I said I would come with him, you know, and it was an experience that enabled him to be able to be himself more, because he knew that where he wasn't able to really just connect with people, that I'll be able to connect with them and introduce them to them if necessary. So buddying up with people that, you know, that can potentially you can go networking events with definitely helps. So those will be my top tips. Yeah, just finding friends that, you know, you can share the experience with.
And Samuel, just say that if I was talking to you and your friends at NeoFest, would never have thought that guy was shy or an introvert.
Yeah.
He did so well to speak. So yeah, well done you for being that friend that carries your friend along at the time. Samuel, I'm conscious that our time is running out, but how can people connect with you?
I'm online, so Samuel Ade underscore on Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, feel free to drop me an email if you speak to Matt and you know, you want to connect with me. Definitely do drop me an email. I'm quite active on my socials and on my email. So
That's great. Thank you so much, Samuel, for your time. And please do connect with Samuel and follow his journey.
thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Samuel.